Hello and welcome back to Global Mike. This is a podcast that will be bringing you stories from journalists, what they have gone through, the good stories they have told, the difficult moments that they have faced. And today, we are joined by a gentleman that is a good friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. And we've done things for the last 10 years together or more. And he has I really can say that I follow after his footsteps. Mr. Daniel Furnad is a journalist from the US, but I will let Daniel introduce himself. Mr. Daniel?
Hi, I'm glad to be here. I started working with Thuku at Africa 24 Media, which is a production company that was very active doing international quality productions here in Kenya. Now I'm the commissioning editor for the Faces of Africa documentary series for CGTN, Chinese State Television. My career involves stints at the BBC, CNN, AP Television, et cetera, et cetera. I've worked on 5 continents, including the Olympics in Australia. Have had a lot of adventures and have been here in Africa for about 15 years.
We'll start by asking Daniel. Why are you in Kenya? Is Kenya your best place? How does it feel to stay and work in Kenya for the last, how many years you've been here?
15. So I first visited Kenya in 2004, right before the tsunami. I had been to Egypt, but it was my first time in sub-Saharan Africa. And I found the people here to be really easy to get along with. I mean, I made good friends from the get-go and started having adventures just as a tourist. I then ended up leaving AP for a job with Abu Dhabi TV, which paid ridiculous money. But it wasn't a great place to live, quite honestly. And afterwards, I had a bunch of money in my pocket and a bunch of time, so I started touring around, visiting people. And when I was in the States, I visited a lot of my old colleagues with CNN. And they all said, man, you should go to Africa. It's going to be the next big place for video because people are going to be able to consume it on their phones. And that's kind of what I wanted to hear already. Yeah. And so I was in touch with Salim Amin, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So you are doing a good job. You're doing a job that I love. I love doing, long-haul stuff, documentaries and all that. So tell us, lately, what is your best film and how did it make you feel?
Well, I've got a couple of them, I did one on a woman named Kaltoum Mohammed, who is kind of a humanitarian activist in northern Nigeria. And Kaltoum, for years, has been talking to the Boko Haram, the Islamic militants in the north of the country, and has been persuading them to let go people that they've kidnapped. The insurgency went from something that was really religiously motivated and motivated because they felt that the southern Nigerians didn't treat the northern Nigerians fairly or well enough. And then when the leader of the insurgency was killed, it kind of splintered the group up. I mean, Boko Haram is no longer a unified. There are a couple of different leaders that claim leadership or whatever, but they've become glorified bandits. They kidnap aid workers, they kidnap other Nigerians, ask for ransom, marry the women that they kidnap, and start families with them. I mean, they took a whole school's worth of girls about 15 years ago.
Sure.
There was just another incident of that. But anyway, Kaltoum, I found it was odd when I first met her, which was about 2016, 2017. The young woman, she's about 23, 24 at the time, maybe 22, was talking to the Boko Haram and was brave enough to go meet them in person in order to bring people out. So it was a terrific opportunity, starting full-time with CGTN, to go visit her and tell her story. And I think that it's possible someday Kaltoum could even win a Nobel Prize. She's that brave and takes on other issues now. But that insurgency is a big issue for some.
Is that the story that won you an award? Tell us about it.
Yeah, that won awards at the Tellys in London and the New York Film Festival.
Talk to me about the AI guy from Ghana.
So that's the other one I wanted to talk about. So AI has been a huge topic on everybody's mind. And at CGTN, it became even bigger because there was this company, DeepSeek, that all of a sudden was doing things that nobody else could do in AI, and they were doing it with a minimal investment. And so I thought, I mean, you know, everybody was kind of looking for an AI story to do. So I poked around Africa a little bit, and I happened to come across this guy in Ghana that seemed to be hosting or featured at many AI conferences in Ghana and in other places. Yeah. So I called him up and talked to him. And I just found him, I mean, the phone conversation was good. We had chemistry right away. But I just found he was a really good communicator, and what he was doing was interesting. When I went to see him and interviewed him, the first interview we did was 2.5 hours. Ooh. And we got along so well, but he's such a fascinating guy. He's 29 years old. Actually, I think he's turning 30.
He told me, I met him 2 days ago, and he told me that he's turning that.
Yeah.
So now he's that.
He turns 30 today, but he's a young guy.
He is.
Yeah. He's got his own style.
Sure.
You know, he dresses pretty casually for the conference he goes to, but he's cool. And then he told me what he does, and it's incredible. I mean, he does AI. He has an AI system for health that is better than anything Google has. That is better than anything that any of the top companies in Europe or China have. And everybody's engaged him. He's in like 65 or 68 countries now where he's using his AI to help doctors diagnose patients' maladies and figure out how to cure them. And what they do is they have databases that the AI is able to look at. So they've got, I forget, in Nigeria, it's something like 40 million people's medical records because the Nigerian government works with them. And in Ghana, it's a couple of million. And then they work with private hospitals all over the place, right? So they have all these private hospitals sending in information. And it's information about you know what the symptoms mean, but it's also information about how to cure them, about what's out there, what are the newest, latest drugs, what are the combinations that can help cure it. And it's just, I mean, it's just staggering to think that all this information can all be synthesized in like 10 seconds, you know, based on an X-ray or a blood test or visuals of what is wrong with the person, and that the doctor can come out with a treatment plan like that.
When I met Darlington with our crew for health wellness show, because we were doing an interview for wellness that is hosted by Wajiro Thuku. He was, I picked a very brilliant young man, and again, the present and the future, because whatever he's doing is already something that is so big, even in our imaginations. And again, whatever he's planning for is bigger than you can even imagine. So tell me one thing, what is the most fascinating thing that you have seen here in Kenya? Just in Kenya.
The most fascinating thing in Kenya.
Yeah.
Gee whiz.
No, talk about the positive things.
Yeah. For somebody that's never seen, being here in Kenya, you get used to seeing the Maasai all the time.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that really struck me as the most different or the most wild thing that I ran into was the first time I ever visited a Maasai village, where they all live in these cow dung huts, sleeping all the family in one room, and they have to patrol outside to keep lions from coming in and eating their cattle or eating them. And just the Maasai are such a different culture from what you find in most of the world. And I know there are pastoralists in Nigeria, sure. And it's not like they're the only ones. But their culture is just so different.
Sure. So I want to give a short story about Daniel, because this is the Daniel I know. Daniel hired me as a young journalist in 2012 when I was leaving Nation Media Group as an assistant producer. And when I attended Daniel's interview, we were quite a number. And he asked me, "Are you reporting tomorrow?" And I was like, "I work for a company that needs me to resign and come to work tomorrow morning." So I, of course, didn't report tomorrow of that time. But when I was walking out of that compound, I was like, I am going to work with this guy. And from then on, Daniel went ahead to send me to almost more than 20 African countries to go and tell positive African stories, like you used to say. That is why, until today, I don't tell any negative stories. I know there are a lot of negative stories world over, not only in Africa. But I pride myself of telling positive African stories. And thank you so very much. That is why you get the opportunity of becoming one of the first inaugural guests of this podcast. Because in this podcast, we are going to be telling stories, and you're going to be appearing a lot because you have a lot of stories from what you've said. You have told us that you have visited very many countries. Tell me something that, have you done any story in South Africa?
No.
No, not in South Africa.
I've been to South Africa for conferences, and I've made some good friends down there, and had a really nice time in Johannesburg. But I've never been sent on assignment down there to do a
awesome.
story.
I'll come to Nigeria, but could you tell me why you hired me?
Well, I mean, it was just an incredible interview. I mean, you know, you sat down across me. I had, you know, when I started with A24, we had the Africa Journal program, which is the longest running magazine program at the time in Africa, and we had 3 white Europeans that were doing 4 that were doing the 4 stories that went in the show. And it was being run by this French guy that was just a mess. And I said at one point I went to management and I said, I don't know, I'm interested in doing this anymore. And they said, what would make you interested? I said, first of all, get rid of the guy in charge. And second of all, replace all the reporters, of which I was one, with Africans. And I said, you got plenty of young Africans out here that have talent, that have untapped talent, but have them tell the story about Africa. Why do you have foreigners telling the story about Africa? One of the first person I interviewed was you, and you were the exact person that I was looking for. I mean, when I said, you know, we need young Africans that are fascinated by their continent and can tell great stories that are curious and dynamic. That's who I was looking for. So when I interviewed you, like I've told you many times, that's the best interview I've ever done. I've interviewed hundreds of people over the years, and for jobs, not not for news. And you just knocked it out of the park. And I thought, this is the cornerstone. You know, we're going to build on. And if everybody else can be somewhere in his league, then we're going to win. And you were always looking for a story that was difficult to do. Yeah, it was like, let's go to Djibouti. Nobody asked me to go to Djibouti. You know, you were like, yeah, I'll go to Djibouti. I'll go do this. What was the one you went through Nigeria? Was it Gambia?
Gambia.
Yeah. I was like, I mean, most people hadn't heard of Gambia, you know, let alone think that, hey, I can go find some great stories there.
Yeah.
And that's what I was looking for. I was looking for somebody that was curious about their continent and that was brave and was going to get out there and do what it takes to find stories and bring them to the world in a way that was ultimately professional.
Yeah, the story about Gambia and Djibouti are stories that fascinate me because when we were going to Djibouti with George Kenyajui, one of the guys who will appear on this podcast, he's a brilliant cinematographer, is that I tried getting accreditation to, media accreditation to Djibouti, and I couldn't get it. But through my own research, I discovered that the IGAD office is hosted in Djibouti. The Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, is hosted in Djibouti. So I went online and checked who, back then it was not very, we still had internet, so you could research online. And I found that the Secretary General of IGAD is hosted somewhere in an office in Djibouti. So I wrote myself a letter, but I made myself the Secretary General of IGAD and signed the letter. So I didn't go to the Djibouti embassy anymore to look for a visa because we needed visa. I think today we don't need a visa to go to Djibouti. So I told whoever needed to hear, yourself, you had to sign me a budget. And then I think I had to be released from the assignment desk. And then I had to go with the most important person on a trip, with the cinematographer. So I told him, we have everything. Everything. We have everything. We have visas, we have money, and we have everything. So we flew off. No, we actually left the office and said that we are going to the airport. But we were not going to the airport because we were not booked for a flight until 2 days later. But we didn't want anyone to know that. So we went to my house. I was staying in Udheru along Wayaki back then. And we put the equipment under my bed. And then we went down to see aloud and have some uji kidogo na chai. So 2 days, unfortunately, Mambo called us, but Kenyajui had not switched off his phone. So his phone came through, and I told him, boss, you have to switch off your phone. So he obliged and switched off the phone. 2 days later, we had our tickets ready. I bought the tickets myself from the agent in town. So we had our tickets ready. We went to the airport. We took off to Ethiopia. We landed. A few hours later, we took off to Djibouti. When we landed at the airport in Djibouti, I confidently went to the counter and presented the letter of invitation from the Secretary General of IGAD. And they looked at the letter and they're like, journalists from Kenya? Yeah, we are going to IGAD. Okay. Then you need to pay $50 each for the visa. And I was like, yeah, we knew that. And they let us in. And we went to the streets. Unfortunately, we didn't have any documentation as journalists. We are not going to IGAD. We don't even know where IGAD is. We are going to Djibouti. But we have made contacts of a number of people who are going to follow their stories. And the good thing about African Journal stories, hey, guys, we used to work for the biggest magazine show in Africa called African Journal. Reuters African Journal?
Yeah.
That's what they used to call it then.
Reuters, yeah.
And we went and looked for the best stories of a country that almost no one went to, and we did some good stories. But we were arrested because we didn't have any documentation for journalists. So that story will continue. So I want to ask you, Daniel, when we did all the stories that we did, and I know we had a lot of other journalists. We had Masharia, we had George Mutero, we had Wanja, we had Christo, we had Alex Majala, we had the best cameramen, Mambo, Kinyajui, Rotich. We had a team of brilliant young people. When we did what we did, how did that make you feel that was your proposal? To have African journalists tell their own stories?
I mean, I was incredibly proud of, not myself, of the young team that we had and their abilities to find stuff that was not just interesting to them, but interesting the world, and to overcome challenges. I mean, I had heard some of that story about getting into Djibouti before. Yeah. And of course, you can't tell a story if you're not there to record it. So, the first thing that every journalist has to do is find a way in when you've got a difficult situation. But again, I think I trusted you guys. I'd say get 4 or 5 stories while you're there, and that would make it economically, financially feasible for us. And you all did it. I mean, nobody ever came back saying I couldn't do something. Yeah, so nobody ever came back with less stories than we expected them to. People came back with more stories. But I felt incredibly proud, but also I felt that we showed, or that you guys showed, the rest of the world that they should pay more respect to Africans, that Africans are capable of doing the same things that Westerners or Asians or whatever are able to do.
African stories told by African journalists, told by African experts. In Djibouti, I didn't tell you that they asked us, when we went to the director of communications, they asked us, who is the journalist and who is the engineer? So to them, the cameraman is the engineer. So nowadays, I call our cameraman engineers. So thank you very much. We are going to take a short break, and we are going to have Daniel back to tell us the stories that he did in Europe. You want to talk about Europe?
Yeah, Europe, Asia, America, you choose.
Okay, we'll go to Europe because I like Europe. So thank you very much. See you on the other side. Hello and welcome back to Global Mic, a podcast that will be giving you stories from journalists who have worked around the world. The stories of their triumphs, their challenges in the field, and maybe some of the things that they may never tell you in other places. So Daniel, in your journalism career, what have you done and congratulated yourself? Like, I pulled this.
There are so many things, so many stories that I worked on when I was in Asia that we beat the competition. We figured out how to get the key interview, or we figured out how to get the video out earlier, or et cetera, et cetera. But there are a couple of things that stand out in my mind, and part of it is because, guys like you are usually the frontline guys that do this stuff. And Sam, doing the camera work, that take incredible risks and then, come out with really great video. One time when I was in East Timor, I picked up a camera because we heard there was some kind of clash between independent supporters and the militias that the Indonesians had armed to try to convince the East Timorese that they didn't want independence. And I just picked up the camera because nobody was around. The cameraman was having lunch or something, and I ran down there to where we were. And there were a couple other camera guys that came down with me. Andy Japmiko, who is Ricciardi, who is an incredible cameraman and producer. And I'm thinking it might have been Dean Johnson. Jono might have been the other one. But anyway, there were kids throwing stones right in front of the UN compound at guys that were heavily armed, and had black uniforms on or whatever, making them intimidating. And they started getting closer and closer together. And I got pushed off to one side, the other side of the road from the UN compound, and the other two guys ended up on that side. And so all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. The militias started firing at the independence guys, and the independence guys were trapped because they had another group of militia coming the other way. And so the independence guys had to run into this militia, and the militia guys started pulling out machetes and hacking them to death. And I don't know what it is, but sometimes you just, when you're looking through the camera, you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about the action. You're thinking, I have to record this. This guy's going to lose his life. Sure. Yeah. And this is the last, chance for him to show, for us to show a real patriot that wants independence. So I focus in on this guy being carved up by about 6 guys with machetes. And all of a sudden, the militia guys look over, and I'm the only cameraman. My guys all the other cameras were on the other side of the road. Whether they were smarter than me or whatever, they had all jumped into the UN compound for protection because the UN had guards.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, these guys all point at me with their machetes. Yeah. I realize that it's me that they're after now. Yeah. And I run into a house that I had kind of looked at and thought, well, if I have to go somewhere, that's where I'll go. Luckily, the door was open. Yeah. And I thought I was a dead man, And I tried calling my wife to say goodbye or to say whatever. And I called London. I called the London office to say, I'm trapped in this house. If something happens, have somebody come and look for me here. Yeah. And eventually the military, they set the house on fire because they were trying to smoke me out. And eventually the military came, the Indonesian military came and cleared all the militias, cleared everybody out. And I got out of it.
So by the time they're setting the house on fire, where are you?
I'm in the house. I'm in the, I'm bouncing back and forth between the kitchen because I could see the street from the kitchen in one of the bedrooms because I'm thinking I'll try to hide under the bed. I mean, it's one of those things where you're thinking, what is going to happen if these guys break down the door? And 5 guys with machetes come in here and, are going to cut me up or whatever. And I'm thinking, do you beg for your life? Do you hit him with a camera? Because we had very big cameras back then. Yeah. This is the late 90s. And do you hit somebody with the camera and see if you can, somehow you can
escape? The only weapon you have, so you have to use it if it comes to that.
Well, I guess. Or beg for your life. Do you think that would work? Luckily I didn't have to find out.
Okay.
But that was the pictures, and Andy had made even more amazing pictures of a massacre up in the north of the country earlier. But again, it was another important stepping stone toward the government finally giving the East Timorese a chance to vote for independence, and so it was an important piece of video.
Yeah,
and then the other one. Was when I was in. Give me a minute. I'm trying to.
Okay, before you think about that, tell me, because again, we don't want only to remember your bad stories, which must happen anyway. Because this is life. Life has the ups and downs of life. So, who are the most high-ranking people that you've interviewed, and what do you think about them? Were they just lucky to be in the positions they held?
Fidel Ramos, who was the president of the Philippines, was incredibly nice and kind and wanted to answer all of your questions. So he was a really good host and lacked ego compared to a lot of other people. When I interviewed Jesse Jackson, I found him incredibly intimidating. He's very, very charismatic, and he was looking like he might be the first black president way back then. But he was quite the character. I interviewed Susan Sarandon, who was really nice.
People tell us what they did, what they were. These guys, some of these guys may not know.
Oh, Susan Sarandon was an actress. Yeah. Jennifer Lopez is an actress and a singer.
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson was a presidential candidate in the U.S. and of course Ramos with the Philippine president. I mean, I've interviewed King Sihanouk of Cambodia. I interviewed a Greek king one time here in Kenya.
Yeah.
I've interviewed, actually, I've interviewed two kings in Cambodia. The Ranarid who followed his father.
Yeah.
I interviewed, but the other interviews, like I interviewed people in the jungle that were Khmer Rouge. That's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were cold-hearted murderers. Yeah. And you look at these people and it's hard to see the humanity in their eyes. But as far as famous people, there were actresses, heads of state, kings, queens, stuff like that.
Do you draw your journalism work from your father? You tell us what your father did, because I know your father. By the way, I've met your father here in Kenya. He came here in Kenya. So do you draw that from him, and how did he inspire you to become the journalist that you became?
Yeah, I think my grandfather worked for Voice of America, and I was inspired by his stories that he used to tell. But my father basically would bring me into ABC all the time to see him work, and he gave me internships when I was a teenager, and I followed him into CNN. One of the things that he really loved, although he was a boss, he was, I think, the senior vice president at CNN. I remember him telling me stories about his field work, about how he did presidential campaigns in the U.S., did presidential visits to Europe and other places. And so I was able to draw on a lot of the stuff that he told me. And, as journalists, we tell each other stories. That's why this podcast is such a good idea. I mean, we're storytellers, and what I always used to hear from my father, I used to watch the stories on ABC News, but he used to tell me what he did, how he got the stories, and, what he was thinking when they shot different video and how they were going to use it. So I was very well prepared. Actually, the first day I worked at CNN, my dad had told me that, listen, why don't you go in on the weekend? There's a hostage situation, and they could use an extra pair of hands. So I came in and I talked to Will King, who was the head of tape production at the time at CNN, back when we had things on tape. And I said, I'm Bob Furnad's son. I'm starting Monday as a PA on Prime News. And my job starting as a PA was going to be to find people's names, to make sure they're fonted correctly, and to get tapes in order that needed to go into playback. That was, it wasn't a job that was hugely challenging. But I walk in and tell Will, this is what I'm going to do. And he goes, oh, that's great. Yeah. Some of the journalists were blindfolded and taken into the places where the hostages were, and they interviewed the hostages. And I've now got 2.5 hours of interviews with the hostages, on these tapes. I need you to take Ben Coit in, and I need you to edit a half-hour special by 4:30 in the afternoon. It's my first day. I'm supposed to find people's names and tapes with numbers on them, and I'm producing a television show on my first day at CNN.
How old are you then?
I was 20.
Oh, no. So how did you do that?
Ben his father was the head of WTN, which was one of the news agencies at the time, and he and I just knocked it out. Okay. I mean, it was like being a carpenter's son. When you go to make your first table, you just make it. You've seen your dad do it how many times?
It's an easy run. Yeah, so gratitude to Mr. Bob Furnad, because you made a good journalist, and we are always happy to interact with him. So tell us something, Daniel. When you look at all the countries that you went to, especially when you are a field reporter, a field person, whether, as a producer, as a reporter, when you went around, when you were working for the international networks, where would you say that you made a story that, you still look at it and you are like, I would still want to do this story again? Different times, though, like it will give you a different, color and all the things that we look for when you're telling stories. But where did you go and you were like, until today when you remember that, you were like, I would still want to go back there and I would want to tell the Camo story every day. Yeah. Not just because the Camo took me down, but because it's always a good story. That's why I tell the story almost every year. So what's your story, Daniel?
Well, you know what's funny about that is that when I was in Asia, I kept going back to the same places. Yeah. So what I would do is I would see a story that I wanted to do and didn't have time to do, and I would usually try to work that story in during an election. I used to go in about 30 days before in the election and do stories all the way through to voting day. And I'd have typically 2 or 3 camera crews that would, and some local people. We used a lot of interns who all ended up working for us full time. But send those people out in the field, and I would find time to go do different stories that I had identified, or I would take the time to go follow up stories. And that's one thing that I don't think journalists do as often as they could. Is there may not be something hugely outstanding and different about it, but to go do a story of somebody that survived the tsunami and then look at their life 10 years later and what they've done for it. Or go to one of the people power students on the streets of Jakarta or on the streets of Manila and go find out what they become, what happened with their lives. Because you run across survivors, you run across people who were either lucky or brave or just found a way to stay alive, when you're in a conflagration, during a war. Something I'd love to go back to Afghanistan. I'd love to see. I had some guys there that local guys that were working for me when I was there for AP at the end of the war. What had happened is I was in Paris when the 9/11 bombings happened, and then I went to London and they said, we want you to go to Afghanistan. Because then the Americans invaded Afghanistan, and I got there right before the Taliban had been toppled. But I would love to go back there. There were so many stories. Afghanistan is an incredible place, just rich with so many stories. But at the time, it was a really cool story because I was able to show how happy people were to be rid of this extremist group that had made their lives miserable. And people were going in their basements unpacking TV sets because they weren't allowed to watch TV before.
Ooh. Interesting times. And, again, like you say, you always think about the places that you went and did stories and you'd want to revisit. And you always try to create a mental picture of how those places look like. Tell us something about...
Well, actually, why don't you tell me about a place that you want to go back to?
I want to go back to Goma and Kinshasa. As in, through my storytelling career, DR Congo is one of my best places, and you know that because I did stories there when we were working for the African Journal, and I went to Goma, Eastern Congo, and I couldn't imagine that I was dining with rebels because that's the only way you get their story. These people are bad people, like you say. They are people that in a normal setting you wouldn't want to meet them, but for you to extract that information from them, for them to talk to the media, and they would want to talk so that they can be seen to be winning, you have to be one of them. So maybe you have been a rebel sometime. So I would want to go back there. I know the country is still a bit troubled. They're just making some agreements in the United States right now. President Kagame and Tshisekedi and William Ruto are in the US, I think, trying to make some deals. I hope it works because when you look at what happens during war, when the bulls fight, the grass suffers. So the people still continue suffering until today, but the big bosses are still eating. Now they're in the US. They're having their good time. But the people who are most affected are suffering there. So I would want to go to Goma and Kinshasa. Kinshasa not because of war, because there's no war in Kinshasa. I didn't manage to go to Congo-Brazzaville when I was in Kinshasa because it was a busy working schedule. But today I would cross the bridge and go to Congo-Brazzaville because I hear it's just a tiny place.
I've pitched a documentary there. I want to go do.
Yeah, let me be your documentary PA. Yeah, so I would want to go back there, and I would want to go back to Egypt and Sudan, where I did stories about the pyramids of Meroe, the pyramids of Gaza or Giza, and I went to Luxor, one of the most luxurious tourism sites and all that. As in, I like enjoying as a tourist, even as I work, and that is why I would want to go back to those places. But I wanted you to tell us about newsroom politics, because this is something that we cannot avoid. You have been in the newsroom for quite a lot of a number of years. When it was cut to cut, when it came to digital, now it comes to even mobile phone reporting and all that. It's easy. You don't have to go to the newsroom to work. Guys are working from home when you're still a staff of a TV station or a radio station. How did you navigate through the newsroom politics?
I've heard of situations where office politics were bad had at media companies or at television stations. But I've been extremely lucky. Yeah, I mean, it helped a lot that my father was a boss at CNN. I'm sure that there may have been people that wanted to take shots at me that just didn't do it because they thought there was no reason. But I thought at CNN we had an incredible group of young people, because everybody almost was the rank and file were straight out of college. And it was the first time anybody had ever done 24-hour news. They were the first 24-hour news channel.
Sure.
And so everybody just pulled together. I mean, we were all buddies. We all went out, after work together and had a good time. But everybody was just, because it was 24 hours, there was just too much to do for you to politic. And there may have been a few reporters that were trying to get, assignments there. I mean, I worked with Cristiano and Paul, and Cristiano was a writer when I started working with her. Very talented, but she had to be very aggressive to get on the air. There were so many good-looking people at CNN. There were experienced people that eventually wanted to come over once CNN started to get a little bit of fame. And Christiane was just incredibly hardworking, just incredibly, she knew what she wanted and she was going to go for it. When I worked at AP, again, when I was working in Asia, I started the North and South American operations in Washington, and I had some terrific people that I worked with. It was a startup, so everybody had to pull together. There was no time to be politicking or talking, badly about somebody. But when I got out to Asia, again, it was young people. AP was really cheap. They paid less than even the local stations did. And so, I had to find young Asian people to come and work with us and work their way up. And again, they were all, had an opportunity to do things that were usually reserved for people much older than them. And so, getting to be at a press conference, arm to arm with the most famous reporter in South Korea, or the most famous anchor person in Jakarta or something like that was pretty thrilling. And there was, and because again, with agency, it's news all the time. There was no time to kind of fight. And I guess, maybe at Africa 24, there was a little thing between one of the owners. But I think for the most part, I think it was young people pulling together. I don't think people were, bringing me cakes and saying, "I want this assignment." Everybody, we needed everybody to be, to be working and to be aggressive and be doing what they're doing. So there was no time to try to brush off the other guy.
I can confirm to you that I didn't take Daniel in a cake for him to send me to all the countries I went to. But I'm not going to give Daniel a chance to say some winding up, points, because he's going to be a regular guest here. And that's the end of our conversation with Daniel. This is the podcast, The Global Mic, that will be bringing you stories from journalists, where they have been, what they have done, the achievement, and the challenges they have passed through. My name is Duku Karaoke. Till next time.